Well, good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. I'm Gene Paranek. Today is our 54th episode, Friday, April 23rd, 2021. I appreciate all of your patience last week as I was off in the mountains, out of cell phone coverage. There was no way to do this show last week, and a good getaway. So appreciate all of you and appreciate you being back here today for our episode. We're going to cover the COVID news as we always do. After that, my guest today is Priya Gogoi, co-founder of Celsee, Inc. And we're going to talk to her all about her recent articles with Entrepreneur.com when we get to that point in the show. After that, I want to talk to you about CDRH again, because they've been telling us what's going on in this sort of post-COVID world. What happened in 2020 and how are they dealing with the overwhelming influx of EUAs and everything else they had to deal with? What does that mean for other applications and other submissions? After that, we're going to do our usual Q&A. There's the lineup for today. But first, I want to talk to you about COVID metrics using covid.cdc.gov as our source of truth. Of course, you remember back in the day, we used to love COVID tracking. They finally went away because they felt that CDC had finally taken over enough to be able to be useful, and we've found the same. They're putting up lots of great data, visualized in some really cool ways. Let's start with the state of Michigan. This is the community transmission level by county still this week in the state of Michigan. It is basically a solid block of red. Surrounding states somewhat, if we zoom out on the United States community transmission by county, you can see Michigan as well as the Northeast, basically solid red. It's kind of interesting too, because what does this mean about things like hospital admissions? If we look nationwide, Michigan stands out, but not for all the good reasons. We are dead last in terms of hospital admissions, with the highest number per 100 beds of hospital admissions of anywhere in the country, which is sort of staggering. Nevertheless, the news is not actually quite that horrible, because we're seeing a peak coming with the new cases. We are seeing the positivity rate start to plateau and drop. And very, very thankfully, the deaths have remained relatively low, which is not to minimize those that have happened, because they're still there and they're up from the lows of last summer. So still stuff happening there. What is fascinating, and the story just keeps evolving here, the age groups that are a part of these admissions, now much more the 40 to 69-year-old age group, and an increase in the 18 to 39-year-old age group, whereas before, oh my goodness, nearly half of these were the older Americans. And so that accounts for some of the change in the morbidity and mortality, lower on both of those. The vaccination picture just keeps getting better and better. Here's a graphic that CDC just put out. First doses on the left, the darker that is, the better. Fully vaccinated on the right. And ironically, the Northeast and the Plains states seem to be leading the way, with Georgia coming in last. Number of doses delivered, 258 million. People fully vaccinated, 80 million. The daily administration just continues to climb that straight line that we've come to expect, with the exception of a little blip in February. It's just continued straight up. That's the COVID news today. I just want to mention briefly again, Into Being is still seeking an embedded systems developer. If you know of anybody who's interested in this role, we have begun interviewing, but there's still opportunity if you'd like to apply or tell somebody about it. We'd appreciate that. And don't forget about the quarterly pitch party. That is coming up again at the end of June. Our judges are ready and waiting, looking forward to your submissions. One more time, the MedTech Crossroads pitch party. If you're a US-based MedTech startup, you're eligible for consideration regardless of stage. You'll have 10 minutes to pitch at the end of an upcoming MedTech Crossroads show. And near the end of June, our judges will discuss the month's candidates, educate us on their thought processes, and then select a winner for the month. The winner will receive a check for $2,500. Judges' decisions are final, and Into Being will not participate in the voting. So send those pitch decks to at medtechcrossroads.org, and we will look forward to that. Well, with that, having done our COVID news, we'll come back later to our CDRH news. But for right now, what I want to do is welcome our guest on today, Priya Gogoi. Priya is with us.
Hi, everyone.
There she is. Welcome to the show, Priya.
Thank you. I'm
We're
excited.
we're so glad to have you, and it's your second time.
Yes.
Last time we talked about startups as well, but today we're going to be talking about some really cool stuff because you have been a guest contributor to Entrepreneur.com. I mean, national entrepreneurial magazine, which is just so cool. But let's back up for a second because Priya, you've got Ross there behind you, one of your alma maters, and coming out of there, you and your co-founders got together around a kitchen table and conceived of Celsee. Give us just the quick version of how that all went down. If you can summarize, the better part of a decade in 30 seconds here. Give us that.
Going to Ross happened actually after Celsee. So before doing Celsee, we were from smaller schools. So me and another co-founder, Saida Saperi, we were from Eastern Michigan. We did masters in molecular biology. And our third co-founder, Chris Seymour, he was from Grand Valley University. So we were three of us just out of school, and me and Chris actually worked at Esperion Therapeutics and as interns. And at the end of the internship, I asked both Saida and Chris to start Celsee from our kitchen. And my husband was Kalyan Handik at that time, and he was our mentor. So it was, we actually had to go out. We didn't start with any idea. So it was a unique way to start a company, I guess. We didn't have any idea. We didn't have a product. We actually went out, did idea screening, and then developed our product based on what we heard from the customers. And that's how Celsee was born. And we never
We're,
looked back.
we're always preaching that, right? The whole idea of customer discovery, and customer
Yes.
discovery. And here's a success story where you sat down and you didn't say, this is the product we want to deliver. You said, what are the needs we can meet? And then
Yes.
went out and found it. And knowing some of the story, I mean, I know that the company itself, and I'm sure we'll get into some discussions of pivots as
Yes.
entrepreneurs and as investors, but the company
Okay.
pivoted a few times and ultimately successfully exited to Bio-Rad.
Yep.
Well, you're a successful co-founder, entrepreneur, mother, and you've seen a lot. I was really tickled when I was reading your articles from Entrepreneur.com. You've got two there now, and they recently honored you with a tweet of your second article out nationally, which is really fun to see. And as I was reading them, Priya, as I told you earlier, I was looking at those and I went,
Mhm.
oh, she's a philosopher. She's seen so much of life, and she's putting it all together in these ways, and I really enjoyed it. Um, Tell us just a bit though, before we go into the articles, how does one get to write for Entrepreneur.com? This is quite a step to the national scene.
Yeah, so I think entrepreneur.com is really a cool way for entrepreneurs to get their voice heard at the national level, because entrepreneurs cater to smaller companies and entrepreneurs. I saw a perfect fit for me and entrepreneur.com. And I had, when you are an entrepreneur, you go through so many experiences, so many things that you want to give away your wisdom a little bit, all the things we did good and didn't do good right. So there is a thing called entrepreneurial contributor network, and for that you have to give your previously published articles and your career track, your why you think you are a good fit, and then they do a kind of background check, if you are even fit for them. And then
Mm,
they, after that background check and that matching, then they let you into that network, and then you can write. And still it is not a 100% guarantee that once you are in that network and you write something, it will get published, but
mm.
you get a high chance that your article will be published.
That's very cool. And of course, your background, obviously as a startup co-founder, but then also post Ross as an angel investor and having done analysis of businesses. You're sitting from a very interesting position. You can sort of talk from the investor perspective. You can also talk from the co-founder perspective. You've felt all those pains, to be honest, and now it's
Yes,
sort of looking at these things.
yes,
I want to go into these articles. You've got one entitled "5 Tips for Navigating the Entrepreneur-Investor Relationship," and
yes,
this written from the perspective of the
Andre,
entrepreneur, as I see it.
yes.
The other one, and I just love this, what Sherlock Holmes, Mother Teresa, and Sun Tzu can teach you about becoming a startup investor. This just, I love it. But let's look at the first one. And I want you to take it here and talk a little bit about how you came to this theme. But at the very beginning, you quote Marshall Rosenberg and say, at the root of every tantrum and power struggle are unmet needs. I was reading just the other week a book by one Father Thomas Dubay, who described humanity as incarnate thirst. That is, we are embodied desires. And it seems a similar theme. And I thought it a very profound place that you started this article.
Yeah.
How every tantrum and power struggle are unmet needs. Help us understand that.
I mean, if you're married or have kids, you would understand, right? Let's understand from a kid. Why does a kid cry? Either he or she is in pain that we can't solve, hungry that we are not feeding. There is something that the child that are not solving or understanding that the child is trying to express, right? And the only way the child can express at his level is by crying.
Mm,
So that's at the very basic level. But if you see human relationships, it's always about the power dynamic, whether in lovers, whether in parent-child relationship, whether in husband and wife, the power struggle is always at the root of our relationships, And the most
mm.
harmonious of relationships are where it's balanced, people know where they stand, and still work out, continuously work on the issues for a balanced relationship. So
It's so profound. You follow up by saying that when an entrepreneur and an investor first team up, it's akin to the initial phases of falling in love. And that's often marked by infatuation. It's often marked by what can I get out of you? I think you're going to fulfill me.
yes.
And so the investor's going, I think you can make me money. And the entrepreneur's going, well, I think you can give me the money I need. And what are some of the things that are misplaced um, needs there, misplaced desires? How are those reflected?
So when you first, when an entrepreneur presents and how the investor hears, and when everything, it's the chemistry works, you only want to see the strengths, not the
Mm,
missing. Maybe there are some things missing, but like people, that's the danger, right? One of the first things is like attracts like. So if you already like someone, you'll figure out a way to see only the common things. The things that don't work out, that only comes in after the relationship is formed. Before you are in love, you want to see what you want to see, right? You want to
mm.
see, oh, this person is just like me. Actually, it's about like and like. You like something about the other person, and then that starts. You think the other, the company is smart, it has the coolest technology from an investor's point of view, and from the entrepreneur, they're like, oh my god, they're I got funding. All my problems are solved. Just money is the only thing you want, but that's not the only thing you want, really, right?
That's
After
let's. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
so after the relationship is formed, then the trick, the things start to pile up, right? When the milestones have to be met, when there is accountability, that's, when you have nobody to report, nobody to accountable, you have freedom. When you are in any kind of relationship, your freedom is compromised, right? That's
Mm.
where that imbalance starts to happen. So
This is wonderful. I love the conversations where you're not sure at the point in the conversation whether you're talking about business or family or relationships, because it applies to all of them. This applies
Yes,
to everything.
yes,
And it's interesting too, because what you're saying, Priya, and I've never quite thought about it this way, is that the strengths of the synergy between the entrepreneur and the investor can be the things that they both like and
yes,
appreciate, and what they're missing is the things that they both haven't thought about, or the things that they are
yes,
both weak points.
yes,
And this sometimes results in you say very eloquently, I didn't peek into the soul of 30-year-old Steve Jobs when he got fired from Apple, but I'm sure he would agree with me that the pain stings. Sometimes things don't end the way that we want
yes,
them to in these relationships.
yes. That's life, right? Things don't happen the way you want to. I call them actually, people are shocked by, I call those the slap of life.
Mm.
But you need to be, slapped by life to understand the deeper things in life. So it stings, it hurts, but you know what? You get up and you become stronger and you become wiser. So
If you're willing to see it that way, which you certainly are, you've now seen this from both the entrepreneur and the investor
yes,
side. In this article, you derive 5 lessons: anticipation, balancing, due diligence, honesty, and walking away. Let's
yes.
walk through these. So let's start with anticipation. Tell us about anticipation.
uh, Anticipation is what I mean by that is pre-planning and
Mm,
being knowledgeable. So entrepreneurs should know about the basic structure, as I was talking about, basic structure of how any relationship works. Nothing is going to be perfect in life, right? That's the truth of life. Nothing is going to be perfect. Like we are visionaries, and most entrepreneurs are visionaries, and the vision inside our mind is always perfect.
mm,
However, when it's execution, it never turns out what's in our image. So, whatever started out perfect and good, you got funding, yes, but you have to be prepared for what's coming, what's gonna happen, right? Logically, we have to think logically. So, look at the past, look at other startup examples, look at what other entrepreneurs are saying. From other entrepreneurs, you learn from your logic. You say that forewarned is forearmed. So
mm,
basically, don't go out like a naive person that everything is going to be perfect. You have to be prepared. And that's what
mm,
I mean by anticipation. Do not work on your strengths as well as your weaknesses. So cover all of those things.
mm. That's good. It's a certain level of knowledge you have to have going in to see where things are coming and where they're likely to go.
Yes.
But then balancing, and you reference a juggler, and there's a line you say in your paragraph on balancing. You said, whenever a difficult investor situation confronts you, rather than quitting, always remember they're here because you invited them in your time of need. That's a very humble and soul searching kind of a statement to
Yes.
make. Tell us
Yes.
about balancing.
Um, you know, we all know that entrepreneurs have to be jugglers. We have to wear multiple hats. There are so many fires that you have to put in cadence. You have to be on top of your product and service. You have to be on top of what's happening inside your company, all the people, everything. You have to design and plan and delegate the jobs, as well as what's happening at the top with the investors, the board group, the board, how it's happening, how it's formed, how is the politics happening there. There are a lot of things that you have to be very balanced. You cannot neglect basically one area, um, to focus on others. So you have to know that you have to
Mm.
balance all of those.
And then you talk about due diligence. We usually think of due diligence as something that an investor does to an entrepreneur,
Yes.
but here you're applying it the other direction. What does it mean for an entrepreneur?
It works both ways, right? You don't want to marry somebody that you didn't do a background search. Same, like, yes, when investors are putting their money, they have to do due diligence on the startup. But as an entrepreneur, you don't want to go to just money sources from everywhere. You have to think always about the future. Yes, you got the much needed source of money from somebody, but then when you want to go to VCs or somebody, what if they want to do credibility check on this, your early investors, and they don't check out? Then even if you have a good product, you have a good team, but your early investment sources are not credible, so now your whole entire credibility gets under a cloud. You don't want to get stuck in those kind of deals. That is why it is very prudent that you only take money from credible sources, and you have to do that due diligence.
You say sometimes all it takes to bring down a startup is an unresolved conflict between two warring groups of investors. So it's not just the sort of integrity of a given group. It's also, is my team compatible? I know we've seen probably in more than one instance, but at least one instance where there's actions that could have been taken as a part of a startup, but because of those kinds of factions and interests within the investment team, a pivot wasn't possible when it should have been. And those are interesting. Those are interesting situations to find oneself in.
Yep. And always that's what we are taught in business school. Like in cases of conflicts and all, in such situations, people should focus on the bigger common interest. Always personalities get in the way, always. Mostly it's about personalities, and if we just let go of the big personalities and focus on the common interest, many times it works out.
That's a great point. And of course, sometimes it's the big personalities that like to get in that room in the first place, and then it's like, okay, set that aside.
Yep.
Well, again, the whole article sort of blends all aspects of life, and the next thing you come to is the power of honesty. And business is not a place known for its honesty, and yet you maintain that there's no greater power on earth than the virtue of honesty.
Yes. I believe in the power of honesty, because when you are an honest person, you have nothing to fear. You know the power of nothing to fear. You are standing with the facts, with the truth. You've maintained, you have been, when you are consistent, then you have nothing to fear. And I would rather go and stand with nothing to fear than to deceive and be, temporarily successful, because I always see that deceptions will be caught sooner or later. And that shouldn't be the way to go. When you can use truth and facts as your power weapons, when you have those everybody has those at this person. I don't know why people are afraid of the truth many times in business.
I know when I first got into the world of startups, I would see more if we just sort of we need to give people this impression at whatever cost. And as time has passed, I feel like maybe it's the internet and things are so much more researchable. Maybe it's so much easier to find out the truth of things. Of course, in your other article, you talk about Theranos, and we'll get there in a minute. Things like this still do happen, and it creates a lot of heartache.
Oh yeah. Deception never ends up good. Never. It has never, I always say, in the end, we all have to face ourselves. And if you cannot face yourself, how can you face in front of anybody else as an entrepreneur too? And mostly because we are entrepreneurs, we are not just responsible for ourselves. We are responsible for our team members. We are responsible for the legacy that we are going to leave behind. We are responsible for all the people who have shown faith in us. So more than anybody else, it's on us to be honest and upfront.
And nevertheless, at some point, you say at the end, the wisdom in walking away. That doesn't go against honesty. It's just sometimes the relationship doesn't work out, but you still have the goal in mind. I found it interesting. You said, sometimes walking away gracefully is the greatest thing you can do to let your startup thrive. So I think what you're saying is, even in walking away, it's not an abandonment of the goal that you started with.
No, actually, I was telling that from my personal experience, right, in Celsee. In 2017, what happens is, as you know, founders, we are, as I said, we wear multiple hats. We are passionate. That's why we take the company from nothing to, you know, some kind of value. But then what happens is, even myself included, I was not a fit for a growing company. I didn't have experience for the scaling up. And at that point, when I was a hindrance to actually pivoting, because I had the sunk cost fallacy. I fell into the trap. You put so much emotions into one technology. When it pivoted, I myself had trouble moving fast enough and for the scale up, right? So, and then I was, you know, I was suggested that maybe I'm not a good fit for a scaling up company. I myself, at that night, I had that uh, dilemma, right? I had the power that night that because the managers and the employees love me, I had the power to destroy the company. You know, the people came to me and said, Priya, if you say we are going to all walk out together, you just have to tell us, and none of us will continue this. And I looked at myself and I was so angry that, you know, from my own company, I'm suggested to walk, you know, to go away. I would rather just break it. And a lot of founders do break up their own company because it's so much emotions. But you know what? In the morning, I got up and I said, when me and the co-founders, when we started it with a positive attitude to make a difference in this world. It doesn't matter if I or somebody else stays from the beginning to the end. What matters is the cause, right? What matters is what we created. We have to let that thrive. We have to let Celsee, you know, flourish. It doesn't matter who does it. You know, the best person who should be able to should do it. And that was what I got out of it personally. So
Wow. I can't imagine being inside your head that day. That's a
yeah,
very hard place to go through.
yes,
But today, not everyone gets to say that they co-founded a company that got acquired by Bio-Rad.
yes.
So another one of our glowing examples in the state here of a success. This is wonderful. I want to go to I want to take you to the other article, Priya, and thank you for sort of, you know, these articles. It's a bearing of your soul. It's everything you've learned in life applied to what am I going to tell an entrepreneur? And in the other one, you talk to investors, which I think is fascinating. I
Yeah.
also want to ask our audience, if you got any questions or comments, you want to join the discussion, feel free to raise your hand in Zoom here, and we'd be happy to take your questions or comments. But the second article, what Sherlock Holmes, Mother Teresa, and Sun Tzu can teach you about becoming a startup investor. You do not shy away from bringing all aspects of life and many divergent examples to bear. And the reason you say it this way is because you're looking at three stages of a startup's life and how, as an investor, to deal with each stage, which isn't the same. And it's interesting because, Priya, you said you had to grapple with being a founder and the company getting to a stage and having to say, what's my role with the company at this stage? And I think what I'm hearing you say is, for an investor, they also have to do that same soul searching. Am I the right fit for this stage of the company?
Yes.
So take us through these three stages.
So the you're very right that the three stages that I've mentioned are basically, you can superimpose them on roughly the life stage of a startup. And before, you know, you have maximum control over your decisions before you even sign on the dotted line. And that stage is what we call due diligence, right? Before you invest in something, any relationship, it's the same thing. You want to know the person, you want to know what you're going to be involved with, you know. And in fact, for life science and medical device companies, that relationship could be very, very long. So you better make these decisions right, because you're going to be stuck in an unhappy marriage otherwise. So the first thing is what we call, what I call the detective stage, the investigation stage, where, you know, I advise that it's, in my experience, the best due diligence is a combination of the analysis of the character of the people involved, the leaders at least, and the technical due diligence, which involves, deep dive into the business plan. You look at everything, the value proposition, is there, who are the competitors, is there a market, is there an IP, how strong is their IP portfolio, is their technology even solving a real problem? Those are the technical part. But at the same time, the psychological evaluation or the intuitive process of assessing people is also very important.
Mm.
So that's where I advise that you should work like two famous detectives in our fiction world, not just Sherlock Holmes, but also combine it with Hercule Poirot. And I think some people have mentioned to me that, hey, we are not aware of Hercule Poirot. We know about Sherlock Holmes. So Hercule Poirot is actually another very famous detective by Agatha Christie. She's known as the Madame of Crime. Um, so a very classic movie is The Murder on Orient Express. It's a very good one. Um, I highly recommend everyone. So he was a very psychological, um, psychological, what we say. He did his assessments based on psychological study. He called it the little gray cells. So
Mm.
you only learn it on the field. You will get experience in, like, if you ask certain questions, then based on the reactions on what people tell you, you can figure out what their character is. So
It's interesting you pick these two because, as you told me earlier, Sherlock Holmes is very data driven, looking at the data. Hercule Poirot, very focused on the psychological uh, sort of probe, sense,
mhm.
respond method. This is different than just saying, "Oh, I've got a good sense of human nature." You mentioned that when interviewed, Theranos, and we all know Theranos, the company that Elizabeth Holmes grew up into a supposedly multi-billion-dollar company based on pretty much exactly nothing. When interviewed, Theranos board members described Elizabeth Holmes as a person who embodied integrity and competence.
Yes,
And so you're saying here, don't just go on your gut as to whether
yes,
you trust this person. Be a
yes.
Sherlock Holmes, be a Hercule Poirot.
Exactly.
Wow, what a contrast.
Yes, that is because, sometimes many investors, they jump to conclusion based on their initial liking or disliking of the
Mm,
person. But always remember, as I said, if we are all predisposed or biased to like people that are like us. So many times we might like somebody who's just trying to be like us. You know what I mean?
mm,
They will say exactly the things that we want to hear. So never confirm your assessment of a person just based on whether you like or dislike totally. And if you find deception, but I did say that if you find deception right at that intuitive process, you will know.
mm.
We in the field know when we encounter deception. So that way you should never say yes. But if it's based on liking, you like a person a lot, do not just invest just based on that.
Mm. It might just be a confirmation bias based on what we talked about
Yes,
earlier.
yes, we all have confirmation bias.
You go on next to Mother Teresa of Calcutta, and this you call stage two. Tell us about this.
So many of the smaller investors don't even get the privilege of being on the board. Once you get the ones that do get the opportunity to be on the board, what I suggested is take your board position very seriously. Once you're on the board for a startup, we know um, we cannot afford the best of industry people in our own team, right? So the board acts like a strategic headquarter for a startup. um, it's like the guidance system for the CEO, because the team that is working on, for the operations, we are working, for our own problems. We have our own R&D to do, we have our sales, but for strategic decisions, for the network health, all those things go back to the board, and it is very necessary that the board members are responsible.
Mm. You say from
That
a
matters.
founder's perspective, a patient investor feels like nothing short of the blessings of a saint. And I
Yes,
know that even as a, into being, even as a service provider to startups, oftentimes we will feel that or not feel it down through the structure of an organization, and well-placed grace and understanding on, I mean, it's not to say they can't hold people to a standard and say, here's what has to happen, but well-placed grace from an investor is
yes,
a very motivating thing. Very
yes.
motivating thing.
Yes, the bridge rounds especially. I think
Mm.
many of us know about the bridge rounds, right? Too many is also a red flag, but we all know that startups are struggling with so many things. You cannot always expect that, hey, we said this, there won't be any roadblocks. When you're into innovation, thousand things can happen, but smart investor knows how to prioritize those and knows when to give that lifeline.
Well, then you jump us all the way from Mother Teresa to Sun Tzu, the military strategist. And you're saying both of these mentalities have to be present to make it all the way through the investor life cycle. When does one need to be a military strategist?
All the time, actually. It's a war. Business is a war, right? You have to nurture. You have to be a good person, of course. As I said, you have to have that honesty, that compassion. But at the same time, we cannot forget that it's money we are talking about. And the primary purpose investor puts in money in a company is to multiply that amount. So that strategist has to be there in the beginning. You cannot be an investor without having that mentality. So actually, if you say a strategist should be right from the beginning, right? You are the investor, you have the nice side, but it is also sometimes it's prudent to be, always be aware that don't fall into the trap of emotional traps. Oh my God, okay, we understand. Sometimes it's easy for people to just keep providing, for example, the bridge rounds till it becomes a bridge round to nowhere. We call that, you keep on giving bridge rounds, then the company becomes handicapped and it goes nowhere. So you have to do that balance.
Sometimes part of both the strategy and the compassion is to recognize that there's some misfit of things or players, and to say everyone's going to be better off to move this around, to change it and make some changes.
Yep.
Can be a
Yep.
very hard thing. Well, this
It
is
is a
amazing.
hard thing.
I love how you've written both to the startups and to
It
the
is a hard
investors.
thing. Yep.
Oops, I think we had a data overrun there. Can you re-say what you just said the last 20 seconds there?
No, I just agreed with you. I just said I think my internet connection is slow, but yes, sometimes an investor has to be ready to make hard decisions because ultimately, remember, the company goal is bigger than human beings sometimes.
Mm,
you know, uh, that is the way it is. You have to be
I
compassionate. The company goal first.
you've
It
got
is really
such a career as an entrepreneur, as a wife and mother. You're an investor. You are a uh, chairwoman of a not-for-profit board. You're writing articles for entrepreneur.com. Who knows, there may be more businesses in your future. I think you also have a career as a crisis intervention counselor between investors and co-founders, because the insights here, Priya, are spot on and really resonate with the deepest levels of of people's being. So I can't tell you how fun this is.
yeah.
But where would you leave us today in terms of things to think about? We've got inventors, we've got investors, we've got entrepreneurs. If you could say one thing to all of them, what would it be today?
What we want is a very strong entrepreneurial ecosystem right now in Michigan. And for that, we not only want smart innovators, meaning entrepreneurs, The ecosystem needs equally smart investors. We want equally good talents to flow into Michigan, and it's a congruence of everything that has to take place for our ecosystem to thrive. So that is, I think that is what I have put out in my writing too, that it's not enough to just have smart entrepreneurs and not have smart investors. We need all kinds of people, all kinds of talent in Michigan, and if we all put our brains, our hearts, together, I think our community can thrive and can become one of the best in this country. I have very high dreams for this place.
I love it. I love it. And we've seen those dreams come to fruition before, Priya. You've,
Thank you.
you did the long road with Celsee and made it successful. And so let's do it. Let's build this community.
Yes, thank you.
That's awesome. Priya Gogoi, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, everybody.
You all know me that I just love the places where everything comes into congruence. And Priya is a great thinker in that way. Next up, I want to share with you some things from CDRH. But before we do, I'm going to put this slide up. This is Into Being's website with these FDA education segments that we do many weeks. This list goes down below those three that you see there, but if you go to intobeing.com and click your way through the webinars, you'll find the FDA education segment. And any of these topics that we've talked about, you'll be able to look them up and you'll be able to get back to them. We've heard anecdotes where people say, you know what, I'm assigning these as required reading for the mentorship class that I'm doing with startups. Go ahead and use it that way. We'd be happy for you to do that. But little nuggets of stuff, like there's one on ISO 13485 versus 21 CFR 820. You've heard these numbers. What do they mean? Well, it's right there. It's free. Go click on it. Go use it. We're glad to put that out there for folks to use. Today, I want to talk to you again about something straight from FDA, fda.gov. The following is not original content from Into Being. It's just a digest of what the agency has put out, but we want to make sure that you know about it. And so the following is based on an article published by Dr. Jeff Shuren and Dr. William Maisel from CDRH. Of course, CDRH, the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, the arm of FDA that deals with devices and radiological health. Big surprise. This one was entitled "A Year into the Pandemic, How the FDA's Center for Devices and Radiological Health is Prioritizing its Workload and Looking Ahead." This is important because many folks have asked us, what's going on inside the agency? What should we expect? We know that FDA got distracted, rightly so, with COVID and did a great job with it. But what does that mean for our application? We'll talk a little bit about that today. This quote from Drs. Shuren and Maisel: "Throughout the public health emergency, staff at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's Center for Devices and Radiological Health have worked tirelessly and strategically to meet unprecedented workload demands and to help provide access to high-quality critical products that are essential in protecting public health." We'd have to agree. One anecdote that we heard back in the day during the emergency use authorizations was the FDA actually asked a startup, "Do you mind if we call you on the weekend?" And they were like laughing because FDA never says that. Turns out that 10-fold more emergency use authorizations were issued during COVID-19 than during all other previous public health emergencies combined. And there were probably half a dozen to a dozen public health emergencies where emergency use authorizations were used. So that is a quite staggering number. In terms of devices cleared or authorized, approved, cleared, or authorized in 2020, it actually turns out that the number was up overall, a record high of 132 novel medical devices. Now, novel medical devices are defined as de novo, pre-market authorization or PMA, a breakthrough device exemption for a 510K device, or a humanitarian device exemption. Of those, 132 new medical devices made it to market. That doesn't include all the traditional 510Ks and such that made it through. This is the ones that are truly novel, groundbreaking, have no predicate. That is a 40-year record. And compare that to 29 novel devices authorized in 2010. That number has jumped dramatically. So no surprise that that happened in 2020. But I guess kudos to the agency for making that possible, that they could actually do those reviews in the middle of all the emergency use authorizations and everything else. Well, but there's the dark side to that, or at least a hard part to that, and that is best summarized by the word triage. The agency has had to triage what they put their time on. They were grabbing people left and right, having them review emergency use authorizations. Well, that means that some things got dropped, and they're having to find their way back on track with that. But they're very transparent about it. They handled 17,000 conventional files in 2020. These things like pre-subs and 510Ks and whatever else. 5,500 EUA and pre-EUA related files. The agency says, since the start of the pandemic, we've issued emergency use authorizations or granted full marketing authorization to almost 1,300 medical devices for COVID-19. In addition, we conducted timely review of more than 2 million medical device adverse event reports. Those are the problems that happen and get reported back to the agency. So they've been absolutely overwhelmed. And it turns out that still, as of today, or as of the 15th of this month, the list of pre-EUA and EUA submissions under active review across the center still tops the 600 mark. And they're still getting 40 new pre-EUA and EUA submissions per week. You've heard us warn you away from EUAs to watch and figure out when that's going to start to close down. But nevertheless, people are still pushing those through the door in addition to normal submissions. So there's a backlog of non-COVID-19 pre-market files pending review. How do those break down? It fares better for some than for others. As an example, unless IVD pre-submissions are related to COVID-19, companion diagnostics, a breakthrough designation request, or have a significant public health impact, says the agency, we have been unable to review them. So if you're part of a group working on IVDs, this is not really great news unless your IVD is focused on COVID-19. They're doing their best, but they're actually going to be declining IVD pre-subs that don't fall into those categories. And IVD submissions are experiencing longer than typical review timelines. So they're trying to take some action, but the basic thing here is that if you're an IVD, you are second in line to things related to COVID-19. There's not a lot that can be done about that, but it is worth knowing that that is a hard spot. We were hearing Priya talk earlier about startups and bridge rounds and things like that. Startups that's involved in IVDs may well have to just look to be able to float during this time period. How about divisions that are reviewing things like related to PPE, ventilators, general hospital equipment? Sounds like they're still keeping up with their MDUFA, the Medical Device User Fee Act timelines. MDUFA specifies what the timelines should be, and they've been able to keep them up. That being said, they're not expecting pre-subs to go through in the usual 70 days. They're expecting them to be closer to 120 days. Nevertheless, actual submissions, marketing review submissions, sound like they're usually on track, except in case-by-case situations. So generally good news there. And that pretty much leaves us where FDA is at the moment. If you're doing IVDs, be ready for delays continued as of the middle of this month. If you're doing other things within CDRH, there's some hope. Expect the pre-subs to take longer, almost twice as long as usual. But don't worry that the actual submission is going to take dramatically longer. They do seem to be honoring those timelines. And with that, that's our update from CDRH. we'll pause right here for just a moment and see if we have any questions. We do have something from Ken Spencer saying, can we post these FDA links on the MCIRC website? Of course, Ken, you can. Follow up with me afterwards. I'm happy to get you any links you may need to that. These are accessible through fda.gov, but we can get you more specific links than that. I'll give just a minute to see if anyone has a question or a comment on this or on anything else that we've talked about during the show. When we posted earlier, we did hear from Paul Reiser in the chat saying that TechTown has a job board. That was in response to a comment that I had made about Into Being looking for a programmer. And if Paul still happens to be on the call and wants to tell us any more about how to get part of that TechTown job board, we would love to have you tell us about that, Paul, but it's totally up to you if you're still on the call. There he is. Paul, I'm going to make you talking permitted here and turn you into panelist here if you want to hop on and just tell us about that.
Here we go. Can you hear me, Gene?
We can hear you, Paul. Thanks for hopping on.
Awesome, awesome. Happy Friday, and I'll be brief, but yeah, this is a offering and a tool that is within the TechTown website, but is available to ecosystem partners who have jobs and or job offerings and opportunities that they would like to post for great talent across the region, across the state, to be able to see and potentially apply to positions. We have been offering this service for about 2 or 3 years, I believe. And it really was based on the genesis of a number of different entrepreneurs, community partners, industry professionals coming and saying, hey, I'm looking, keep your eyes out for me. And then also, of course, employers saying, hey, we really admire and respect and appreciate the talent of a lot of folks that we met at TechTown or met in the entrepreneur ecosystem at large. How do we connect with them? And so we wanted to get out of the middle of that and allow supply to meet demand and demand to meet supply. And this is what it does. It is free. You can just go to the particular portion of jobs section at techtowndetroit.org. And you essentially just create a profile there and request that you want to be a job lister, essentially, to be able to list positions. And then TechTown will receive those, just do a little cursory review. And then if in fact it's accretive or complementary to the entrepreneur ecosystem, innovation, kind of technology, then it'll more than likely be approved. And then you can post positions.
That's great, Paul. I appreciate your hopping on and telling us about that. 'Cause it's one of those things that we all know these resources are available. And what I find fascinating, what I love about venues like this, and I thank you for being here and participating, is sometimes we just got to remind each other of what's available and how we can all help each other. So I'll follow up with you afterwards, and I appreciate that. We'll make this segment available so folks can learn about TechTown's offering there as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Gene. Appreciate you as always.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate you. Well, that brings us pretty much to the end of our show. Unless I see any hands pop up here in the next 30 seconds, we will close it out for today. Keep those cards and letters coming. We're still looking for companies for the pitch party that's going to happen leading up to June. And we'll look forward to being again with you next week. Hope you have a wonderful week. Enjoy that spring out there. It's amazing. Get out there and enjoy it. I hope the snow is done after last week. We'll talk to you soon next time on MedTech Crossroads. Bye-bye.